So the question is, how do you move out of the academic parking lot? And so the obvious choice is to move into the academic position that we believe we're training for, and that's about 15 to 20%. And sometimes we have to make the choice between waiting for that prime tenure track or tenure position, or it means sometimes taking these part-time contractual instructor positions. I don't have the right answer for that. And we do, I know that in institutions that clearly recognize postdoc training, one of the things that tends to be most highly attended are things around making your academic CV, preparing for academic interviews, anything that talks about career progression are very well attended. And interestingly, at the institution where I am in Ottawa, those are not only highly attended by postdocs, they're also highly attended by senior graduate students. So we're basically, the Postdoc Association and the university are serving dual purposes. So I think there's something to be said with those sorts of training in those institutions. But then there's the movement into these alternative careers where the path is not clear and it's not straightforward, and there's often very little resources to move into them. So we also advocate strongly that institutions should help move. I mean, just the fact that we're having so much issues right now with trying to explain to government what a postdoc indicates that we need to have some more PhDs who are working in these policy positions, who are working their way into government. I mean, the only way to improve our position is to kind of get in there and educate. And then a lot of postdocs move into instruction, be that at the college level or many different levels, and in industry. But I think there's a real, I know as someone who works in translational cancer research, there's this false belief that there's lots of jobs in industry. There isn't, I can tell you. And they often want somebody trained in industry. They don't want somebody who has 6 years as an academic postdoc. They want industry. So this idea that it's a default, I think, is a real misconception that we'd like to dispel. That being said, there are a lot of postdocs who now work in positions that are hybrid type positions where because you're not tied by the rules in writing a thesis in the same way graduate students are, there's lots more flexibility to do some of these postdocs that combine industry work with research work. And I highly recommend those. Or things like knowledge mobilization, or things like that involve engaging government. We've seen that the people who are the most successful at making this transition haven't stayed, this typical postdoc tied to your bench or your desk sort of thing. The more you get out, the more these opportunities open up. And so this is the three things that, after being up in postdoc policy for 6 years and being a postdoc for 6 years, these are the three things that I would take away if I were talking to a senior graduate student in my lab or a postdoc that's been around for 6 years. What can you do? A, be realistic. Look at your own CV. Be realistic about what your chances are in moving forward. And if you cannot garner that realistic notion, please encourage someone else, your mentors, your supervisors, somebody you trust, to look at your CV and say, what are my chances? Be informed. I think institutions should really focus on the realities of the career progression with graduate students. I mean, way back to the choice of entering graduate school. I know that there have been surveys conducted where they asked the question, if you knew before you started graduate work, if you knew what your actual career prospects were, would you take this path? And a lot of the times people wouldn't. They would maybe go into something more professionally minded, which has a more direct career path. And I think people believe that if you just become more educated, the jobs will come, and we're finding more and more that that's not true. And finally, be involved. I mean, obviously, I want postdocs to be involved in their own advocacy, but the more involved you get at the local level or the national level, the more these things open up. The more you're known, the more you're able to connect with people. From a completely selfish point of view, it opens up many avenues outside of your research. And it's, who knows, if you end up in academia, it then gives you the connections, the administrative experience, all these other things that can help move that transition. And finally, this is our current CAPS committee, more or less. And then at the bottom I have where our website is. So I encourage anybody, actually if you put in Canadian Association of Postdocs, it'll come up in a Google search very quickly. But we keep everything virtually. So the CRA letter is there, our letters to the MPs, our letters, everything we put up pretty much instantaneously. So all the information you might want is there. And these are the people that I work with, and it's been a very interesting experience.